They shake, they rattle, and occasionally roll. They're the most violent, unpredictable racing machines man has yet conceived. Funny cars, floppers, plastic fantastics, call them what you will, but they're 5-second, 260-mile-an-hour combat packs at grandstands like no other breed. The Mount St. Helens of the quarter mile. Their roots are the stock cars of the early 60s that sent many a loyal dragster fan to the hot dog stand. They said race cars don't have doors. Then something funny happened. The stock cars started doing wheel stands. Street cars didn't do that. Then a blower or two showed up on full-bodied steel cars, and they got even funnier. That's funny as in peculiar. Suddenly, the fans were cheering wildly for the Dodge, the Ford, the Chevy, whatever they own. Product identity, some trackside psychologists said. Then came nitro, plastic bodies, tube frames, and a troupe of touring stars with colorful nicknames. They blazed the tires across the continent, leaving some legendary stories in their wake. When NHRA accepted them as a real racing class, the unfortunate name had stuck: Funny Cars. Hello everyone, I'm Steve Evans. As I'm sure you've already figured out, the focus of our show is the funny car class of championship drag racing. And who better to talk about the past, the present, and even the future of funny car racing than two men who have both earned world championship status. Kenny Bernstein, the Budweiser King.
Hi, Steve.
And, of course, Don the Snake Prudhomme. Snake?
That's Steve.
Kenny, first of all, thanks for inviting us into your shop. It's really some place.
Well, I'm glad for you to be here, Steve, you and Don both, and we're proud to be here in Orange, California. Transplanted Texan to come out here to the West Coast, which many people have done, but it's a nice place, offices, 10,000 square feet. We're glad to call it home.
And Snake, the second order of business, we should explain to everyone, but that term floppers is kind of a hardcore inside term.
Well, Steve, don't blame it on us. It's you announcers, I believe, that came up with that.
I believe it's an abbreviation of fender floppers, someone said one time. Well, are you guys ready to talk about what you do best, funny car racing?
Sure. Absolutely.
Let's
get comfortable.
You got it.
Hey, you guys. The other day, I read in the paper that they dug up an old race car at Lyons Drag Strip that is now closed.
You know, in the article, the gentleman that wrote it seemed a little confused. He said it was a funny car, like a stock car.
Well, you guys were too busy flogging your top fuel dragsters in those days to maybe know what was going on, because the funny car really did start as a stock car. In fact, an old pal of yours, Dick Landy, was one of the first. He kind of altered the wheelbase, and the car started carrying the front end off the starting line, and the people went nuts. And that's really where it came from. The first funny cars, like this one at Dick Landy, were not built from the ground up. They were modified A-factory experimental cars, an official NHRA class that had strong factory participation. Ford ran their single overhead cam racing engine here. Later, their famed shotgun Hemi. Of course, Chrysler Corporation with its Hemi and all of the big block Chevrolets. The factories were actually using hot rodders all over the country as R&D contract specialists, coming up with exciting new projects from carburetors to camshafts. The racing was close and exciting, and many a fan thrived on it. But for these drivers, the rules were a little too restrictive. They wanted to go quicker and faster no matter what the rules were. And the first modification they made was to the wheelbase, moving that rear axle forward for better weight transfer. At first, just a few inches. By 1965, the wheelbase had been altered 1.5 feet. Suddenly, carburetors were replaced with fuel injectors poking through the steel hoods. Roll bars had been installed, and in some of the tanks, nitromethane instead of gasoline. Well, the next logical step, superchargers. And suddenly, these cars took on their own identity, funny cars. By 1965, some real innovations started to appear, such as lightweight flip-top fiberglass bodies. They greatly reduced the weight of the automobile while still maintaining the look of a Detroit product. Gone were the stock frames. Now it was chrome-moly tubular steel, which not only made the cars quicker and faster, but they handled better and were safer. And now that the funny car was a true racing machine, it was time for a dose of showbiz, the crowd-pleasing Burnout. And its greatest practitioner, the famed Chi-Town Hustler. Now, the Burnout was originally a performance tool. It was done just to put a little rubber down on the racetrack, get the tires good and hot. But the crowd reacted wildly, and soon drivers were trying to outdo one another for the fans' attentions, and of course the promoters, who booked in these cars to put on nothing more than a drag racing show. Strong personalities surfaced, supported by almost cult-like fans, and soon rivalries developed, real or imagined, and that formed the basis for many an exciting match race. You could hardly turn on a rock and roll radio station without hearing three announcers screaming, "Sunday, Sunday, Sunday." In 1970, the National Hot Rod Association legitimized the cars by creating a separate funny car eliminator on the national event tour. And suddenly these cars were exposed to television, to ever-growing crowds, to sponsors, and a professional form of motorsports had arrived.
The body is the most distinctive part of the funny car.
You're right, Steve. Irwindale Drag Strip, I happened to be there when Don Nicholson was debuting his Ford flip-top funny car. It was the first body that we had seen in those days that they actually came up that you lifted from the front, which we called the flip-top funny car.
In fact, I remember that night he won Best Engineered Car, and they presented the award on the starting line. He got in and the body blew off halfway down the racetrack. It was a Mercury body car, actually.
That's right. It was one of those unfortunate things that do happen to these funny cars, as you well know.
And the altitude record for a body launch was set at Fremont Raceway by Joe Winter.
Yeah, that's an example, Steve, of just what we were talking about, how these funny car bodies can get airborne when there's an explosion of some sort. And I think he lost a body latch or something at that time. I don't really see an explosion.
At Fremont in those days, they would actually break the body up into little bitty pieces and sell them for souvenirs to help the guy buy a new body. In 1970, Paul Smith went for a wild ride, Kenny.
Oh, he did. He had his hands full. Obviously, it picked the front end up, as you could see, leaving the starting line. Went up, came back down. He got back in again in the throttle and up again, and it threw the body right off the car. And that was just a situation there of having your hands full and really not aborting a run when you should have early.
Yeah, Kenny, but I think we're all guilty of that. When you're on a good run, it's just hard to lift. And in Paul's case there, it was doing a wheel stand, setting it down, didn't want to aboard the run, and I believe it just got too much air up underneath the body.
Well, Snake, you had the best seat in the house at the 75 Spring Nationals, Raymond Beadle.
It was in the final round. I was racing Raymond. He was off on a heck of a run. His car was started carrying the front end, and I could see it out the corner of my eye. I thought, boy, when's he going to lift?
Well, I'm telling you, he got it up too. It went up, and just like you said before, Snake, the wind got the body, and off she came, and out the parachute comes.
At the 84 Gators, it was Ron Careni who found yet another way to shed a body, Kenny.
Oh, he sure did. And a tremendous blower explosion right off the starting line, blowing the blower concussion style right off the body, right off the car, by just like a big firecracker going off in a can.
Boy, in the early days, there were some goofy bodies out there. There were Jeep-bodied cars, topless cars.
Oh, I remember seeing the Destroyer Jeep over in Phoenix, Arizona. I thought was fantastic. But you know, it's all changed today, and obviously it's more sophisticated and updated to what is now today the funny car, the long, sleek, narrow type funny car that has the aerodynamics that you have to go 260 miles an hour. In those early days, it was crude. It was the first time around. But since then, all of us have been able to go into the wind tunnel at Marietta, Georgia, and look at the cars and see what the wind does. Consequently, the long, sleek, aerodynamic funny cars prevailed.
I got to give credit to the Snake here for a lot of that, because that first Pontiac car of yours was about the slipperiest thing we'd ever seen.
Well, it was. Pontiac did come up with an awfully slick car in the first of the 80s here, and today that body style still stands true to be the fastest car in the quarter mile.
And the GM engineers got involved in that project. It wasn't just something you did.
Well, they sure did, Steve, but you know, much before that, we didn't know anything about aerodynamics. It was just all trial and error with these flip-top bodies.
Oh, absolutely. The air is so important on these cars, and just like Don said, none of us really knew what it did. We just assumed that it did certain things. We thought this is what took place, but we weren't obviously sure. When we went to the wind tunnel with Ford and the special vehicle operations and looked at it and saw what happened, you could finally see what the wind does to the car and where you could take advantages of that wind. really the difference between the 250 and 260 that happened almost overnight was really aerodynamics. It wasn't as much horsepower right then as it was aerodynamics.
We mentioned earlier those first funny cars were all steel stock bodies, but suddenly, mainly in the interest of weight, things started to change.
Well, sure, fiberglass, of course, came into play. Matter of fact, Don Nicholson's car, like we pointed out, was a fiberglass car. But the funny car bodies today are much the same. There's some material changes, but for the most part, majority of the cars are still fiberglass.
Mm-hmm. And Kenny, you've experimented with some other materials.
Yes, we have. We moved into the area of carbon fiber, which is a little lighter and a lot stronger than just normal fiberglass. It's a little harder to work with for the people that are building the cars, but it does give some advantage. The really advantage we like, besides the weight savings, is it holds its contour of the car. It doesn't collapse during the run itself at 260 miles an hour as quickly as a fiberglass car does. But on the other hand, it's awfully expensive. It's about twice the cost of a fiberglass body.
When I started out, and you got the McEwens, the Perdomes, the McCulloughs, you got people like that. They're a different breed, I think. I think that those people, that when they were on Earth before, they might have been gladiators or gypsies or Hell's Angels or something. I don't know, because we've had some times, and as we've gone around the country, been involved in deals, and I mean, that would be another story. You know, you couldn't print that probably, but I mean, it's just something in their makeup. I think they probably could have been maybe astronauts, or we don't get scared real easy with stuff, just like Daredevil. I don't know. It's just, but you're right about that. There's a few of them around in the funny car ranks that are a little bit different, and they've got funny personalities, and they'll do things that most people won't do, and they're kind of a group of their own.
I see myself as a racer. I picked up the nickname The Snake, and of course the Mongoose. We had a little thing going between us that did well for us. Of course, that started out at 1970 with Mattel Hot Wheels. McEwen was more of the showman. Mm-hmm. I kind of was more of the racer, and today I think I'm still the same way. I enjoy the workings of the machine, the aerodynamics of it, and of course driving the car. The showman part, I left that up to the Mongoose.
Well, first, I think the showman side of it in today's funny car is diminished a lot. It is a business today. It's a way that we make a living, mm-hmm. and we have to run for sponsors and do things for them. So the showman side is kind of over. It's neat to still have the names around, the Snake and the Mongoose, and to see those, the Ace, McCulloch. Mm-hmm. I like that, but you don't see that happening anymore as you did in the early days. But as far as myself and the Budweiser King, I think the people look at the Budweiser King and myself as business and a racer at the same time. I hope that's what it is, and that we're out there trying to do the best we can to win races and a championship. That's what it's all about when you get down to it.
I thought that was just great back in the old days. I mean, I used to almost look forward to staying up all night and working on stuff and getting in the truck and heading down the road and talking on the CB radio. And, you know, it just seemed like this was a certain amount of glamour in having to be at a different end of the country each day of the week and run the car. And it was almost some kind of an Ironman test, like you really felt good if you pulled it all off without having to surrender.
Yeah, guys used to pride themselves on how many dates they could run that year. Not how few dates, but how many dates. And, you know, I think Jungle...
Those crazy, wonderful match race days of the 70s when you ran 2, 3, even 4 times a week, the drivers' personalities really surfaced, almost like wrestling today. And at the top of that list, I know you guys will agree,
Jungle Jim Lieberman. Absolutely. I mean, who can't forget Jungle? He was the greatest of all in those days. He was tremendous. That guy ran more dates. I think I heard one time ran over 100 dates in 1 year. He did have a couple of funny cars. He would jump from track to track and run all over the states running those things.
Well, he'd book the same night at 5 different tracks. He drove the promoters crazy.
You know, he was making sure it didn't rain somewhere so he could get to the next one. Now, he was a true showman. He was probably the first showman of the sport in the funny car side that I remember growing up and reading and seeing Jungle Jim, but what a guy.
And of course the fans enjoyed Jungle Pam out there lining that car up.
Oh, that was part of it.
One of the first funny car personalities was Dandy Dick Landy, who could go through a box of cigars a day without ever lighting up.
We raced them mainly what we call match racing. That's where the match racing started. There'd be 2 cars, 3 cars, or 4 car shows, and we'd go into a racetrack. And it was fantastic. The Ford, Chevrolet, Bill Jenkins, the Landys, our Sox and Martins, having these match races, and boy, it was just unbelievable. They thought nothing to get 6,000, 7,000 people out there just to watch 2 to 4 of us race.
A true innovator was Dino Don Nicholson, the first to use the soft butyl rubber rear tires, one of the first to use a custom-made tubular exhaust system. He achieved his early fame with Chevrolet, but later established a strong relationship with the Mercury division of the Ford Motor Company that culminated with Eliminator 1.
That was the first flip-top funny car ever built by anyone, and of course it was a forerunner of what we see now in the funny cars. And we won as many as 39 races in a row with that thing without ever losing one. 68, we finally decided we was going to have to go to the supercharged cars to keep up. The tires were getting better and more horsepower, and the supercharged cars definitely were the way to go in 68. Well, with those superchargers, we were getting a lot of fires. A lot of guys were getting burnt, and I felt like that without the onboard fire equipment that we got now on the cars, they just weren't safe enough to drive. And NHRA, I think, kind of seen the handwriting on the wall, and they come back with a Pro Stock class for us in 1970.
One of the toughest men, mentally and physically, to ever sit behind the wheel of a funny car, Ed the Ace McCullough.
Art Whipple and myself, my former partner, we started out on our own money in the early 70s, 1969, and then in 1970, and we ran the car, you know, on our own, just independent. We ran through 70 and 1971. We put a deal together with the Revell Toy Company. We started our professional tour, and we run all of the national events across the United States and match race, you know, on the off weeks in between time. probably the highs in drag racing are when you're on race day and you're out there and you're winning your rounds. You know, you get by first round and it's always a little bit tense. You know, your anticipation and in the build up, you get that first round under your belt and then you just get tougher from there. And I mean, when you get to the last round and you know, you get to the finish line, that's probably the all-time high right there, to be ahead of the guy at the finish line in the last round.
I do remember the first funny car I got in, Ray Alley's purple Cuda, and it scared me to death. When they put the body down, I thought I was in a coffin. It was really kind of almost like a lark. I had been doing Top Fuel just as Don back in Texas, not on the major fake aids such as the Snake over here, but I was having a good time with it. I came out to visit Ray Alley, and he said, well, how would you like to drive this thing? And I fell in love with it. I think it was the fact that you did the burnouts and you got to back up and you did another burnout and all those things that we weren't doing in Top Fuel at that time, and it was fun.
Well, a lot of drivers, like you guys, deserted the Top Fuel ranks and went into funny car competition. But there's a couple who started with funny cars and decided to go the other way, back to Top Fuel dragsters. And no one's having more fun doing it than Gentleman Gene Snow from Fort Worth, Texas. Now, a lot of people will argue with you. They'll tell you Gene Snow is the true father of the funny car. The Snowman enjoyed many seasons of success until retiring to drill for oil in his native Texas, and he found plenty of it. And Gene was the first to bring a funny car to NHRA national events. And they said, but Gene, we don't have a class for you. How about you're a C-Fuel dragster? So he had to race the rail jobs, the roadsters, all kinds of machines, unlike his own full-bodied steel car, and he whipped them. 2 consecutive years at the U.S. Nationals, as a matter of fact, and the funny car racers all over the country can maybe thank Gene Snow for bringing the class to the attention of NHRA and legitimizing it finally. And it was only appropriate that in 1970, Gene Snow was the NHRA Funny Car World Champion. Snow at one time ran as many as 3 cars on the match race circuit, giving a lot of young drivers a chance at stardom. One of the most famous Top Fuel dragster personalities and the only driver to win 3 NHRA World Championships actually started a professional career at the wheel of a funny car. In those days, she was known as Cha-Cha. Shirley Muldowney teamed up with Connie Coletta. She was a very popular attraction on the match race circuit all over the country. But at the U.S. Nationals, she got singed a bit in a funny car fire, and she said, you know what, I'm too damn pretty to get burned up like this, and decided to sit in front of the motor where she was more comfortable. But it all began with funny cars.
The drivers were important, as you know, but in one case in particular, the car was by far the most important thing. The Chi-Town Hustler.
Oh, indeed. Anybody could drive that car, and the promoters would book it, and the fans would go nuts.
You bet. They really enjoyed it, the smoky burnouts from one end to the other. As long as you could do that, you had the Chi-Town Hustler.
The smoky burnout thing, we actually initiated that because we felt that if we really smoked the tires hard and got them hot, that we could improve the traction. And like as a tuner and engine builder myself, I almost have some regrets that we were known so much for the smoky burnout when back in those days we were also just a little bit faster than all our competition as well. The Chi-Town Hustler name, we sat in the garage for hours trying to come up with a name, And in the past years, my partners, Farconis and Minnick, had some cars called the Hustler, but we figured that just wasn't enough, and that Chicago being so notorious for perhaps gangsters in the past, that, you know, we felt that relating it to that would be a good idea. And one of us, I don't think anyone really remembers who, said, well, how about Chi-Town Hustler? And we said, okay, let's try it. It seems that back in those days, people were very attuned to the name of a car. Like the Snake was well known when perhaps maybe they didn't even know his name was Don Perdome. And the Chi-Town Hustler was well known when no one knew my name or Pat Minnick's name or Farconis's name. But it appeared that like one had to do something. It had to be long smoky burnouts, or perhaps turning around and driving back to the starting line. All these things seem to get a lot more attention than a low ET time slip.
How does a youngster get a ride in a famous funny car like the Chi-Town Hustler? Well, in 1981, Canadian sportsman driver Frank Hawley took a unique approach.
Frank sent us a resume and proclaimed to have all of the ingredients needed to become a top driver, one of them being that he was willing to work on the car, and another drive the truck, and another was low wages would be acceptable, and we figured we'd give him a try. Certainly, you know, since television media has become prominent in drag racing, why, you know, the Frank Hawley's World Championships in '82 and '83 were our most memorable years.
During the heyday of the funny car match race circuit, I was the editor of National Dragster, and every Monday morning I would get the damage report from across the country. Russell Long hit a pole at US 30. Jungle ran off the end and into a farmer's barn. Mighty Mike Van Sant burned to the ground in the middle of the track in Puyallup. Boy, I'll tell you, those cars were scary.
Well, they were then, and they still are to some extent, even though they're sophisticated, and then they're missiles and rockets today that we take care of properly. But there are things that can happen still. And probably the most dangerous, the one that scares the driver the most, is a blower explosion, where the blower, the supercharger on top of the engine, actually comes off the car. It distorts the vision. It puts the windshield and the tin back in the driver's face, and he's really just hanging on for dear life, so to speak, trying to maintain control. What causes that is usually an intake valve hangs open, sets off an explosion, and it's a tremendous explosion. Of course, you can go further and have a rod come out the side of an engine block and put oil on the headers. That causes a fire to start, and that's probably the most severe that we face. The most that we don't like is the fire, because it's hot and intense inside. You can't get away from it. There's nowhere to go. You're strapped in. You're still going 250 miles an hour, and you can't wait for it to stop. So there's a lot of danger to it, but there's a lot of safety that make it good for you also.
Even though you're going faster and quicker, and the blower explosions are more violent now, more guys walk away unscathed than did in the old days.
Well, certainly. But, you know, you really have to thank NHRA for that, I have to say, because they've done a great deal of work in that department. The fire suits were the first main thing. You know, we lost a good friend, John Mulliken, many years back because of fire. We learned a lot from them. People like Bill Simpson and Deese came out with fire suits that really help protect these drivers. Fire boots, the gloves, the equipment is second to none in racing.
And let's not forget the onboard fire extinguisher.
Well, it's obvious what Don said. NHRA, we can thank a lot for that safety. The front brakes are one, the dual parachutes, the Nomex underwear from Simpson, from the socks all the way to the head stocking, the gloves, everything that it takes to keep you safe in the car. The roll cages in the cars, which is really the most mandatory thing that we have. Again, there's a design there that has to be met, a specification that roll cage has to be intact. And if you'll notice in most crashes, that roll cage is always there and the driver is safe, and that's very important.
You know, recently at the Winter Nationals, Ed McCullough, he had a bad one. Right. And I got to think the front brakes, which are now mandatory, really helped keep him in one piece. He was able to stop that car so the safety safari could get at it.
That's right. Our car was one of the first cars with front brakes. We learned that in a match race in Milan, Michigan. I lost a parachute. The car started bouncing, getting out of control at the other end of the track. And after reviewing the films, we saw that the front wheels were on the ground and the big balloon back tires started bouncing. If I'd have had front brakes on there, I could have stopped the car.
the main thing. I mean, I knew the pulley was alongside somewhere. I knew the guardrail was on the other somewhere, you know, and anything in between, I was trying to stay away from both of them. I left my visor down until the flame went out, and obviously it was, you know, oiled and burnt, and I couldn't see, and finally I lifted the visor up enough that I could see where I was going, and then, you know, at that point I knew I was going to be okay.
And anybody who thinks a funny car doesn't need a driver aboard didn't see Tom Anderson at the 83 Gators. Watch this.
Again, and he's on fire just as we've seen before. The blower is sitting up on top of the windshield, Don.
Yeah, well, that's what happens, Kenny. Of course, as you well know, when you lose the blower, it'll pop up on you like that. But the oil that's burning underneath the car, it probably threw a rod out at the same time. It just keeps pouring oil. There's like 12 quarts of oil in these engines. It just keeps pouring out underneath the car.
Well, he's got a good one going. The main problem I saw there, the parachutes never blossomed. They never opened up to give him a good chance to stop in a hurry.
And it's at moments like these that drivers like Tom Anderson are darn glad that there's a safety hatch in the roof of that funny car. Coming out the side windows is a lot harder to do than this kind of an exit, Kenny.
It sure is. It's a lot easier coming out the top, and obviously he got out in a hurry.
And the fire suit, you could smell it burning down there at the other end of the racetrack, but he was okay. Now, Al Segrini always picks the Winter Nationals for his theatrics, and this was 85.
Yeah, that was on the final. He blew a clutch. Unlike the blower explosion or throwing a rod out, he blew a clutch out of the car. So there's things that can happen to these cars besides blowing the engine up.
What were all the sparks?
Well, it was the pieces from the clutch getting loose and tearing up the bell housing. I don't believe too many of the parts came inside the car, but it looked like it all went out the bottom.
Well, obviously, the clutch has come out like Don says, and you don't think it's as bad as a blower explosion right there, but take a look at this shot and you'll see that Al Segrini at this particular instant can't see anything and eventually crosses the center line.
And in the gathering darkness, that was quite a sight, but one I'd just as soon not see again. At the 80 Gators, we saw just how difficult these cars can be to control. Lynn Imbrogno into the fence.
And if you notice that flash off your screen there, it's the fireball that shot off the car, along with the right front tire. What you see right now is burning is the fuel tank. He's not in any danger at all.
It was veering, I guess. It got out of its tracks, and as soon as it got out of its track a little bit, it went right into the guardrail just as I shifted it. So,
And once you hit the rail, you had no steering. How close did you come to Kosti Ivanov?
I didn't even see Kosti. I tried to keep it, everything to this side as much as possible. I don't remember seeing Kosti at all.
Okay, well, our condolences on the loss of a fine race car, but you're okay, and that's what really counts.
Thank you, Steve.
So it was the hook for Lynn Imbrogno at the 1980 Gator Nationals. At the 1984 World Finals, Billy Williams showed us how to chop the top on a funny car.
He sure did, and right in the lights he did. It exploded, blower explosion, bottom and top it looked like, and it completely demolished this race car.
And this was Billy's first time out in a nitro funny car. It got his attention, Snake.
Sure, and as you notice, it lost the windshield first, and there goes the top.
What on earth happened? I've never seen one like that.
I have no idea myself. It just seemed like it must have started to get lean because the car really started to run good down here. It felt like it really started to pick up, and then all of a sudden just boom.
And your first experience with a funny car so far certainly has not been a pleasant one.
It hasn't been great. I like it though. It's neat. I'll get used to it.
You'll be back.
Yeah, I'll be back.
There was one driver I wondered if I would see back, and that was Bob Gottschalk at the 85 Gator Nationals. On fire, he can't see like a runaway chainsaw into the tender dry woods.
Suffered some burns on my hands and on the tops of my feet, but other than that.
Well, Snake, hard to say which came first, the blower explosion or a broken rod.
It's another bad one. It's his first experience on nitromethane, and it's quite a lesson to go through.
Oh, it's a hot one too, Don, and he lost the parachutes on this car, much like Tom Anderson did on his.
I believe the fire burned out the right rear slick on it, too, and it was giving up as it was going off into the weeds.
Now, I'll tell you, the fire in the woods was just instantaneous.
Yeah, Steve, but too bad they didn't have a guardrail there now, and they do at that particular track. They have a guardrail at the end, so that doesn't happen again.
That last fire right there that really happened was a fuel tank exploding, Steve.
And amazingly, a member of the NHRA Safety Safari, who always wears a fireproof suit, went into the woods and got that man out.
Was there a funny car that you had that you, looking back, you wonder, why did I ever drive that?
Yeah, that happened to me at Seattle Raceway in the lights.
When it flew?
It flew. It took off. That was one of the first big fires that we had in the sport, and it was my Hot Wheels car. It caught on fire in the lights, and it actually took off. The front end raised, and it cleared the lights at the end of the course, and of course blew the body off, and it was tremendous fire.
Well, I was in the tower, and the clocks didn't stop. And I couldn't figure out why.
He was over.
Until later I saw a picture of it, and it flew completely over the track.
But in those days, it was trial and error. We didn't know anything about aerodynamics, and who knows what would happen with fire. And therefore, I found out. It was an unfortunate thing, but a lot of guys experience things like that, and that's where we're at today with the safer car.
Well, I certainly have felt from time to time in the early beginning when I came back to racing in the early 80s, 1978, 79, and 80, and I had been out of it a while, and I had my hands full at Orange County Raceway. As you remember, Steve, I must have made 40 runs over there and never made it down the quarter mile. I hit every guardrail there was. Poor Mr. Donor had to repair a guardrail every time Kenny came out there, and I didn't know if I should be in that race car or not. Believe me, I didn't know if this is what I wanted to do or not at that time.
Was there actually a point where you thought maybe I want to do this?
Well, I did. I thought two things at a particular time. I thought, one, maybe I didn't want to, and two is maybe I couldn't. Maybe I had grown past the stage of being able to do it. But fortunately, I stuck it out and got some help from some friends of mine that gave me some good advice. I finally made it through there, and everything turned out fine. But you bet, I thought for a while, nah, this isn't me. I better go back to doing sandwiches in the restaurants.
But you don't have to tear them up, you don't have to burn them up to be exciting. This is what we come to the drag races for, is to see two good cars run down the track side by side, Tom McEwen and Kenny Bernstein.
This was the 86 Gator Nationals, and Kenny, what a close race it was.
Boy, it was. It was so close. I didn't know who won at the end.
And I can tell you that neither did Tom McEwen. That's what drag racing's all about.
The burnout isn't that easy to do, Steve. You can't over-rev the engine. You got to go into it just right so you don't get too many R's going.
Obviously, we used to do those things for a lot of looks, but today it's really to make the cars go quicker, get the tires nice and hot.
But the starting line, that's where the driver earns his money.
Oh, absolutely. If you don't get off the starting line on time, you're going to lose, just like I did to McEwen.
Is there a trick to staging, Don?
Sure there is. You don't want to stage too deep, and you just want to keep your cool there and collect your thoughts.
The concentration level is very high there, and you have to leave on the yellow. The last yellow is your starting, not the green.
I've noticed with both of you guys, when you win a close race, the adrenaline is really pumping, and not when it's a runaway.
Sure, when you step out of the car, you're real excited, Obviously, you'd be real excited if you win the race, but just at the same time, traveling 1,320 feet at 260 miles an hour is a thrill in itself.
Head-to-head competition, no second chances, let the best driver win. That's what the fans like about funny car racing. Well, drag racing is one of the luckiest sports in the world. It allows the spectators to come to the pits and watch us work on our cars.
It's a show in itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and what you're doing in the pits is servicing the engine. After each and every run, that engine has to be taken apart. Steve, we're talking some 2,500 horsepower these things are putting out, and each little piece has to be looked at, and of course, especially the pistons. There's a piston change going on in the pits usually.
And also the bottom end of the engine.
Yeah, well, you're searching out for anything that's wrong with the engine. We're there to prepare it for the next run. We can't go to the starting line with something that is not 100% or you can't win. So we're all geared, our trucks and trailers and our crew are geared to take it completely apart, inspect it, and put it back together in its best form that is possible to go win a race.
How quick can your crew chief, Bob Brandt, get all that done?
From the time it arrives back in the pits after a run, it takes from about 45 minutes to an hour.
That's pretty quick. How about Dale Armstrong and his guys?
Basically the same thing. Depending on the damage, 45 minutes is on the short side, an hour on the long side.
Well, no one works harder and pushes a screw any harder than Roland Leong. Yeah. You know that. What if I told you Roland and his guys can do it in 2 minutes?
I'd like to see that.
No way.
Take a look. Well, someone once said if Roland had a drivers reunion, it'd have to be in the Astrodome.
Yeah, and I'm one of them.
I haven't made it over there yet, but there's a lot of them.
I drove a gas dragster back in 1963. Then I drove a fuel car in 1964, which I crashed. After that, I hired Don Perdone. I thought he'd be a better bet to be a driver than I was, and that's where it all got started. And we raced a dragster for 4 years. I could see that we match raced the dragster all over the country, of course, just like we do the funny cars now. But then the dragsters were getting kind of scarce as far as getting match races to make a living. So, and it seemed like the funny cars were the ones that were getting all the dates. So that's, in 1969, I decided to build a funny car. We didn't think the transition would be any problem. As it was a lot of problem. The first weekend we ran the car flew, and we crashed, winning the first round at the Winter Nationals in 1969. So there are a lot of things that were different about dragsters and funny cars that we had to learn. I rebuilt the car and went on the road with it back east, raced the rest of the season. We came back in 1970 with this new car that we ran for half the season and won the Winter Nationals again in that year, 1970. Then in 71, I had a fellow by the name of Butch Moss driving, and we won the Winter Nationals again in 1971. So I guess, like anything else, within the last little over 20 years, I had my ups and downs.
Texas was very prominent in the funny car ranks in the early days, and the main car out of Texas that probably set it on the map to begin with was the Blue Max with Raymond Beadle, the late owner, but in the beginning, the Harry Schmidt car when he owned it at the start of the time. And I remember having my shop on Reeder Road in Dallas, Texas, next door to the Blue Max, and Mike Burkhart and, of course, Gene Snow, the snowman, who was dominant in those days also. And the first weekend that Blue Max went out, this was a brand new car. An unknown driver went 202 miles an hour at Sears Point, and that started the Blue Max era.
But the pre-Beetle days, Tharp had to be the star. He's maybe the one that really made the Blue Max as popular with the fans as it was.
Yeah, well, Thorpe was kind of a Jungle Jim Lieberman as a driver. He was a real colorful guy, and he'd spin the car out the end of the track and jump out of it and raise all kind of heck, as we all well know.
Sure. Well, Richard, of course, was. Jake Johnson did a super beautiful job with the car. Probably won more at that particular stage of time with Jake in the car, but Richard was always the character, and he probably brought the Blue Max to the forefront in that animal. And then, of course, Raymond then came in with Harry and became a driver and a part owner, and then actually bought Harry out and really started the process.
That wasn't good news for you when Raymond Beadle bought out the Blue Max.
No, it wasn't. Beadle really took off. He attacked drag racing like he does everything else. And of course, he had a great crew. He had Dale Emery and Waterbed Fred, who was a colorful guy in himself. And, you know, speaking of changing engines, those boys could take it apart and put it together.
Well, they won 3 world championships, but the moment I remember most, I think, had to be at Gainesville, Florida, at the Gator Nationals, when that thing flipped upside down, and he was still trying to drive it upside down.
Yes, I remember that well too. He got out of control and it hit the guardrail and spun upside down. I think it scared everyone else more than it did him.
Well, the thing I remember about that the most is when Raymond got out, he put his arms up in the air and waved to the crowd as if he was a champion. He did it, you bet.
That's what I always said. All we needed was a thing from Rocky
Amen.
to go underneath that to make it work.
Yeah, that's right. It was a heck of a car, and it is still today. Obviously, Raymond's out of the seat now. He's taking care of business across the board in NASCAR and in drag racing, and He has Don Lombardo in the car as a driver, and of course Dale Emery and Waterbed are still there taking care of the car and the wrenches. And when that car pulls through the starting line, there's no doubt that it's capable of putting down low elapsed time of the event anytime it's there.
And another case where the car is the star.
Blue Max.
You've had many big wins in your career, and nobody's probably ever going to come close to that. And and I've won a few times, and they meant a lot to me. But the one that really got me, and I know you got you too at the time, was right after Jamie passed on, in '78. And he'd had leukemia for like almost 2 years, and I was going back and forth to be with him as much as I could, and trying to maintain, and I know that you and Lynn were real helpful at the time, and he liked you a lot, and we went back there and went into that race and come down with you and I in the final at Indy, the big deal on TV, and I remember that he told me, one of the last things he told me in the hospital was, he knew that race was coming because he wanted to go, and he said, go do good for me at the race. And then we got to the race and went through it, and fortunate enough to beat you in the final. And at the end, I pulled off on the grass, and Christ, I was crying. I couldn't even get out of my car, and you came over there. And I mean, it was real. That's something that's touching for me.
Yeah, I relived that race a number of times too, and we were running quite well during the event. I mean, we were a little qualifier.
Sure,
we had
every round.
Everything going our way, and you got a single to run before, and I think you ran about a half track and shut off, so you were pretty well set for the final. But once again, we were running awfully good too, and I went up to the starting line and I looked at it, and I picked the right lane, and I thought I was going to be just fine, and just for some reason or other, it just went up in smoke.
I saw the films afterwards, and it tried to leave, and then just started hazing the tires, and it just blew the tires off it.
And it was unbelievable because we weren't beaten quite some time, and but to watch you go down through there and cross the finish line first, there was I guess that was the only race in my entire career racing you that I didn't mind you winning, but yet that was the biggest race. You were in a state of shock.
Oh yeah.
You're usually in a state of shock when you win a race.
Well, sure. I didn't know. Sunday afternoons, I was never at the drag strip, so I didn't know how it was to be in the final.
I remember you used to when you book your reservations to go home for your flight home, you start from 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Every hour.
Of course, first round was at 12:30.
That's right. And I usually left at 1.
Well, McEwen right now is as tough as anybody out there. He won the '84 Big Bud Shootout, ran 260 miles an hour. But in the early match race days, when you guys were out selling Hot Wheels toys for Mattel, you beat him up so bad every weekend, but he never lost his sense of humor or spirit.
No, he didn't. He had to have one in those days.
And you whipped him.
Yeah, I know. We whipped him bad, but I loved it. I loved beating the mongoose and still do today. But I attacked drag racing a little bit more serious than he did. McEwen was a more colorful guy and had a great time doing it, but I had more of a great time beating him.
Well, he showed us all that there was a business side to this sport, too, that maybe we didn't know.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, McEwen really paved the way for a lot of racers today. Without a doubt, he's one of the best-known names in the sport.
You had to beat him, because if he won, you'd never live it down in the pits. I mean, he's brutal.
Oh, he'd either run a cartoon in the newspapers about how the mongoose beat the snake. Everywhere I'd go, I'd have to hear about it, so you point out I had to beat him.
Well, he's a super guy, needless to say, but like you said, he did pioneer the sponsor stage of things to come. And he's a really smart businessman and has a lot of good knowledge upstairs that he doesn't just give out all the time. You have to kind of pry it out of him, but when he does open up and tell you, he knows what's going on.
You know, it seemed like every year a different guy or girl would win the Dragster World Championship. Not in funny cars. You owned it for 4 years. Then Beetle owned it for 3, and Chi-Town for 2, and Bernstein's headed in that direction. You've told me earlier that it was the fuel system. That was your secret then.
That's right. It's called a combination, and we had it in the fuel system, and we dominated it for 4 years. But all along while we're doing it, someone else, in our case, the Blue Max was our stiffest competition, had a combination they were working on, and it clicked. And it outperformed our combination, and they went ahead and won the championship a few years themselves.
Now, if you went back and looked at the fuel system on the car that he won 4 years with, it would be archaic compared to what you've got right here.
Well, certainly today it would, and probably this one will be archaic in a couple of years, but we're in the dual pump system, and it's really a good system because it can take care of the cylinders a lot better and put more fuel in the engine. And if you can put more fuel in it and burn the fuel, which then leads us to the 3 magnetos, you'll make more horsepower. More horsepower will mean you'll go faster and quicker, and that's the key, and that's what's happening. Of course, what's helping a lot of those areas is the computer that we have on the car to tell us what we need to do, and that is really the element that found that more than one magneto was needed. Actually, that was the thing that told us, because the magneto was missing fire, cross-firing. So there's 3 on the car today.
And Dale told me you can actually run the motor a little easier as far as ignition timing with 3 of them because it burns them.
Exactly. It burns the fuel in the cylinder. And again, whenever you can burn it and put the proper amount of air in the car, it should go faster.
This guy has forced all of you to reevaluate just about everything you've got.
Well, that's true, but also there's guys like Tim Gross that won the Winter Nationals with 1 magneto in his car and ran 560s. And we've run over 260 miles an hour with 1 magneto, so it's just a combination. You know, some people believe it ought to be this way, some others the other way. But power is the main situation, and the fuel systems, and of course the spark blowers, and let's not forget about trying to hook it up to the ground after you have all this power.
Yeah, that's the nice part, is you have all the power, then you have to get it to the concrete and the asphalt, and that's the hardest part to make it work, because if it doesn't go there, you don't go anywhere.
There's a lot of research in the clutch department, too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the clutch is a big key to these things. When you hit the throttle, and as Kenny can tell you, with the situation on his car, it jumps right up. The RPMs go immediately up in the air, and of course the clutch has to take up all that slack and get it down the course without spinning the rear tires, and the computer is the thing that really showed them that.
And when the scoreboard flashes those record numbers, Kenny, the crowd loves it. You should have heard the cheer when you ran 260 and 84 at Gainesville, right here.
And they should have heard me scream at the other end, Steve, as happy as I was, and it was a good day for the Budweiser King.
And on the elapsed time side, the first 560 we ever saw was in 1984 at the U.S. Nationals. Mark Oswald, red car in the near lane, 569, an official NHRA national record. And just a few months later at the Winners back in California, Kenny, the quickest funny car race of all time, you're in the far lane. What happened?
Well, it's obvious right there. It was a heck of a race to half track, but then Rick Johnson just pulled away in the Hawaiian Punch and put a 558 on us.
And you ran a 567 even though your car went back into low gear.
That's correct. We didn't get into high gear, but still, it was a tremendous run for Rick Johnson and the Hawaiian Punch team.
But there were better days coming for you at the 85 Gator Nationals in the far lane.
Well, it was a good day again, and it seems like the Gators is our home racetrack. For some reason, a Budweiser King sets a national record there.
You were going for the speed record, and you got the elapsed time instead at 564.
That's absolutely correct. We thought we'd get the speed record again, but the other one came up.
Well, sitting with us is the man who did get the speed record. 1985, the World Final, still the fastest funny car ride of all time in the near lane Snake.
Yeah, we ran that 264 mile an hour run at Pomona. A tremendous run, and we were really pleased with it. You know, it's one thing to set a record, but it's another thing to come back and back it up.
That's right, and you did that on that day.
both of you guys have experienced the big bang when that car just explodes. And I know at the end of the racetrack working for Diamond P, when I watch those cars, I'm always expecting one or the other to maybe explode. What about in the car?
Well, you don't think that in the car, obviously. You don't ever expect the car to blow up because it's not supposed to. It's supposed to make it from one end of the quarter mile to the other without having that explosion. When it does, it is pretty exciting for you inside as well as outside.
What about the first one after the
That's
big bang?
the hardest part right there. You hit the nail on the head, needless to say. To get in the car after a big explosion, and much like has happened in the past to me, that first run is the most difficult. Once that run's under your belt, you're okay, but you're really low in the seat, you're tight as you can get, and I remember kind of looking down over the dash a little bit, but once that one run's there, you're okay.
Well, I've had quite a few bad ones. Kenny pointed out it really rattles your head. It's a violent explosion that goes on, but you're concentrating on just getting the car stopped. And coming back into it is perhaps like a prize fighter after he's been knocked down and out of the fight. You have to think about it for a little while and get yourself together to come back again.
As far as major incidents happening at a single race, let's hope we never have an event that tops the '81 World Finals.
Oh, that's the one we'll long remember. I lost a car there, and of course Billy Myers. How about that fire of Myers?
That started it off.
It's a rash of them there, but that happens at these events. We were all going through a fuel system problem at the time. The air was super good, and went out there Sunday morning and went, it's going to be a rough day, guys. It's cool here, and we're going to have to richen these motors up, and a lot of them were just too lean, and of course that's where 90% of the fire comes from, is the lean conditions.
I'll tell you, kept me busy just trying to report on all of them, particularly Meyer.
I have had a few accidents, about 3 or 4 major ones, and they've all been at the finish line. However, the '81 World Finals was the one accident that the body stayed on the car. It was a completely different feeling. The other ones are bigger explosions, but when it explodes the body off the car, you feel a little safer real quick because you can just climb out, with the exception of the fire. With this one, you feel more trapped, and it is more of a claustrophobic feeling. And it was a good-sized fire, and it's, you finally get engulfed by the smoke and you can't see, and there's some tension there, but as far as coming back after something like that, it's the old theory of falling off the horse. You just got to climb right back on him and hope he doesn't buck you off again. When you try new things like we do, and you try to stay ahead of the sport and aggressive, then it's not always going to work right. There's always a little bit of chance, and if you average that out over as many runs as we've made, the odds are pretty good in my favor.
Anytime there's an accident, I'm a positive thinker. I think, the guy's going to walk out. Yep, there he is. Tim Gross had one in Columbus, Ohio. I didn't think he'd walk away from.
Boy, did he. And there again, thank goodness it was nitromethane in the car, because as you recall, tremendous fire. He still had that fuel leaking out on the ground. If it had been gasoline, he would have been in serious trouble.
The part I remember the most about, obviously, is that when he came across the track, hit the guardrail, and rolled on top of the guardrail. First thing I could think of was the guardrail getting inside the roll cage with him. And yeah, it was a tough one, the worst I've seen.
I looked at his fire suit later, and the guardrail had cut through all 5 layers and hadn't even broken the skin.
Well, I knew what had caused the incident in 1980. The throttle was stuck. There's really not a whole lot I could do about it. I went to routinely backpedal, as we say in the business, where you back off the throttle some to tame the tire, because it was spinning the tire a little bit, about 400 feet off the starting line. So I was traveling about 180 miles an hour, and when I got on the guardrail, there was not a whole lot I could do other than tuck myself in and say the world's quickest prayer. I would have to say that with these cars, as demanding as they are on the human mind and all that, because of the acceleration we go through, the G-force that we encounter, the severe tire vibration, which really causes a lot of distractions on many occasions, as you well might know. Through all of that, I guess you really put your blinders on, and so there's so much that happens within 5.5 seconds. It's pretty demanding, but again, like I said, it's never been a distraction.
NASCAR racing, sprint car racing, even road racing, you expect a little contact here and there. Drag racing is supposed to be a non-contact sport.
Absolutely.
And boy, Ed McCullough and John Collins, classic example of why that's the most frightening thing that can happen.
it was just a terrible accident, obviously. I was standing on the starting line watching them run at that particular day, and I saw it all happen, and I just walked away. I didn't even want to go look, of course, at all. I didn't want to think about it. I knew there was no way that someone wasn't hurt in that accident. You don't like to see that. Like you say, drag racing is a non-contact sport.
The 1984 Cajun Nationals will be a race that I'll remember for the rest of my life. Ed McCullough driving the light beer car and me driving the JVC car both left the starting line fairly even. Both cars were on a good run. I looked out the side window of my car approximately 400 to 500 feet down the race course. Could see Ed McCullough. I turned back, hit my manual high speed, looked back over again just to check before I put my car in high gear. And at that point I could see Ed as close as maybe 3 or 4 feet to me at that point. Therefore, when on impact, when the car went upside down, I knew I didn't roll, but I had slid several hundred feet before the car finally come to a stop. I think that it would have had a much harder impact on me if, in fact, I hadn't have seen Ed come in contact with me when he did.
Any kind of mishaps that I've had over the years, obviously the incident with John Collins was by far the worst, but I've had fires and, you know, different things, blowing blowers off many times. You don't think about that at all. I mean, you get in the car, you know what it is you have to do, you go out of the starting line, you concentrate on the lights, and you just go out there and do your job, and you don't think about any of the negative things at all.
But as far as after effects that it's had on me, sure, to this day, when I'm in qualifying, even in eliminations, a lot of times I'm a little nervous about possibly a guy that I haven't raced very many times. It's not that it's the person that I'm racing, it's the effect that the crash had on me. A driver with the capabilities of Ed McCullough, losing control like he did with his car just goes to show you that it can happen to anybody at any given time. So yeah, I was aggravated at Ed, but I was so glad that both of us were alive and neither one of us were hurt. That's why I embraced him at the end of the track seconds after the crash, was to let him know and both to relieve myself that, hey, we were both darn lucky that we were still standing up there with no injuries whatsoever.
Okay, guys, enough of the floppers of the past and the present. Let's look into the crystal ball and maybe see the funny car of the future. Now, our friend Kenny Youngblood, probably the best graphic artist we've ever met, came up with this along with Dale Armstrong, your guys. What do you think? Look at this thing.
Oh, it looks a lot like a Pontiac Trans Am, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, in your wildest dreams.
Or maybe a Ford Tempo.
Yeah,
you know, and people watching the show may look at this and say, no. We want funny cars that look like automobiles. That's what automobiles are going to look like pretty soon. Look at the new Taurus and Sable from Ford.
Exactly. I'm glad you said that, because we've seen some pictures of the future cars, and they are like bubble cars, so to speak, and that's exactly what you see here, the enclosed wheels and tires. The whole idea is to get the wind to pass over the car, give it the downforce that we need, and not have as much drag. And obviously the future is looking that way, and the funny car here is portrayed that way, and I wouldn't surprise me it'll be that way.
Okay, let's look at a silhouette that Kenny created here with the same car, looking at it from the side.
Well, the most unique thing about that is having the front-mounted supercharger, which it's safety alone, it'll be
Let's
nice.
look
The
at that right
supercharger
here.
will be setting out in front of the engine instead of on top.
Now, dragsters years ago used to do that.
That's when I first started out, they had front-mounted blowers. So who knows? It'll come back to that.
You know, something else, Kenny, that's interesting here is no fuel is being passed through the blower. It's just pumping air.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a super idea. It'll probably happen. Knowing Armstrong, it will.
What about these exhaust headers? What's going on here, Don?
Well, they're sucking the air out underneath the car. What's happening, using the force of the exhaust system to actually go through some tubes to suck the air out underneath the car, which in effect is a ground effect system.
Mm-hmm. Well, ground effects have got to come about. Every time you run, both of you, the tire is spinning the whole way down the racetrack. It's just not smoking.
Absolutely. It is turning the tire, and the whole key is ground effects. I think that's probably the next logical step that all the funny cars will get to, and this is certainly the way to do it. If we can keep the air out from under the car, it'll go quicker and faster. It's just as obvious as can be. Trans Am's done it, Can-Am cars, Indy cars, all of them have done it, and this is no exception here.
Be more downforce and less drag. That is a key issue in racing.
Don't need a wind tunnel to tell that is one slippery piece of equipment.
might be here sooner than what you think.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you guys. I've had a great afternoon here at your shop. We've talked about a lot of our old friends, a lot of exciting times. There's some scary moments as well that everyone has survived, thank God.
Right.
And I look forward to doing this again, maybe when this machine finally evolves.
Well, Steve, I've certainly enjoyed it also, and I'm looking forward to the future.
Don, thank you.
Let's do it again.